publicly available for those that were unable to attend. My name is Billy Parent, and I'm the moderator for tonight's meeting. We very much appreciate you joining us tonight. Tonight's meeting is to share information and receive feedback on MBTA's Newton Station's accessibility improvements. Angel Donahue Rodriguez, Assistant General Manager for External Affairs, and Sharon Cranston, Project Manager for Capital Delivery, will be giving the presentation. We ask that you please hold all comments till the end of the presentation. And finally, we have planned the meeting to go until 8 p.m. this evening. And next slide, please. So again, thank you all so much for joining. We just wanted to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded as indicated previously. And all MBTA activities, including public meetings, are free of discrimination. The MBTA complies with all federal and state civil rights requirements, preventing discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, limited English proficiency, and additional protected characteristics. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, please visit www.mbta.com/Title9 to reach the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. And closed captioning is available for tonight's meeting. Please click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. You're able to click and drag the captions to better see the presentation. We are also offering ASL interpretation tonight. Interpreters are Amy Parr and Lisa Zalar. If you would like to view the ASL interpreter at all times, keep your view settings in gallery mode. It should be the default setting. You can change this by clicking the button that says gallery mode in the top right of your screen. Gallery mode shows all presenters on the screen together, and this ensures that you can see the interpreter as well as the speaker. If a presenter is sharing slides, the view will change. Your screen will primarily display the slides with the presenters and interpreters video moving to be small in the top right corner. Often the default setting will show only the speaker, not the ASL interpreter. To change this, you can pin the interpreter's video. To do this, click the ellipses in the top right corner of the interpreter's video and select Pin Video. You would need to repeat this process each time we switch interpreters. And next slide, please. To ask questions about the presentation, or if you need assistance with Zoom, please send questions to Ask Questions Here. If you would like to utilize sign language to ask your question, please indicate that to Ask Questions Here, and we will turn your camera on. And next slide. And with that, I will turn it over to Angel Donahue Rodriguez for the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy, for walking us through the steps for tonight. Thank you to the public, and thank you to the elected officials that have joined us and their staff in today's call. I want to quickly go through the agenda that we expect to cover tonight. It'll be a rather quick agenda. We don't expect the presentation to last very long. The intention of today is to provide an overview of the new steps that we are taking to provide better service to the community of Newton as we are reimagining how we are doing the Newton Stations project. Joining me is Sharon Cranston, who is the project manager, and several of my other colleagues here from the MBTA. And again, the intent today is to really listen to some of the feedback as we explore different concepts from you and the public. So we'll walk through a project overview of some of the concepts we're looking at, existing conditions, a project update, a new phased approach that I referenced earlier, and Sharon will walk us through some Newtonville station platform concepts, and then some of the next steps, and then we'll lead on to questions. Next slide, please. This is just a very quick overview for a refresher for many who are obviously very familiar with the Newton stations. So we have 3 stations that are currently all not accessible: Auburndale, West Newton, and Newtonville. Each one has a different set of ridership, and Newtonville has had a higher set of ridership based on the data that we've been able to see. As many of you know, the main issue here is that all of the stations only have one-sided platforms. that don't enable it to be able to provide bi-directional service or accessible service for many of our riders. So the intent here is to essentially figure out a way how we can deliver that sooner. Next slide, please. As you can see, these are the existing conditions. Long steps that I'm sure many of you have seen, some in disrepair, inaccessible, and as I mentioned, low-level platforms, all on one side that don't allow for bi-directional service. Next slide. A project update. So we reviewed what the cost would be to build all three stations. And our estimated costs would be $250 million under the current design for all three stations under the previous concept. And we estimate that it would take about 6 years to construct all three. So we're working on figuring out how we can best deliver stations sooner in a new way, in a new approach. Since the last project update that we provided to many of you, the costs have increased significantly due to inflation, labor costs, supply chain issues, and materials. And we need to figure out a way to be able to deliver our project sooner to the citizens of Newton. As a reminder, we did apply for an $80 million ACEP grant with the federal government, and we have not received it. I would also note that with the help of Congressman Auchincloss, we have secured a $7 million earmark since the last time we had an update, and I wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that. Next slide, please. This new phased approach, it focuses particularly on Newton. As I mentioned earlier, it's the highest ridership station based on the data that we have. It has the greatest potential for transit-oriented development opportunities and has enough space to be able to consider a center running platform, which is something that we had explored in the past. Now, these are concepts, and as I mentioned earlier, Sharon will be kind of walking us through some of those. Under the current proposed concept, we are looking at shortening the length of the platforms from 800 to 400 feet in order to accommodate some of the parameters for MBTA operations. This leads to smaller stations, reduced labor and material costs. However, it does not sacrifice the amenities that many of our riders are accustomed to having: accessibility, lighting, things of the sort. A more generic way of building a station that allows it to be able to be more easily maintained. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's really important here is being able to have bi-directional service and a fully accessible station because we currently do not have that. Next slide, please. I am going to turn it over to Sharon here to walk us through these two concepts. Sharon?
Good evening. What you can see here is the double side 400-foot long platform concept. It's important to understand that this is just a concept and we have not done engineering design of this idea yet. So this is how it could look. You would see redundant elevators on each platform and redundant stairs, but only one up and over bridge structure. And we would have a secondary emergency egress into the right of way. The station entrance would be located near Walnut Street Bridge, which would be close to existing bus connections. And this layout would allow us to avoid any costly construction on the Walnut Street Bridge and let us take advantage of previous design efforts. We are also doing our best to just have this layout create an equitable experience for all of our riders. Next slide, please. This concept shows how a 400-foot center island platform could look. There would be redundant elevators and stairs on the platform and stair and ramp access from the sidewalk. The center island platform layout would require significantly more track work. In order to avoid costly reconstruction of the Walnut Street Bridge abutment, the station location would shift away from Walnut Street to about mid-block, which would, of course, move us from the current bus stop location. And that is something that we'd have to consider. But as I mentioned, we haven't done design yet. We've only done a conceptual level of planning. Back to you, Angel.
Next slide, please. So the next steps. We're going to continue to coordinate with our municipal, state, and federal partners to develop a financing and a funding plan in order to be able to deliver on this new phased approach. As I mentioned earlier, we had applied for an $80 million ASAP grant. And when we were not awarded the grant, we were afforded the opportunity to be able to figure out and have a conversation with the FTA on how to make the grant more competitive. And one of the things that we decided to do was to take this phased approach, which required reapplying for about a $40 million grant with a $10 million MBTA match in order to be able to build one station for this particular moment in a phased approach over in Newton, and we chose Newtonville. So right now we are awaiting the outcomes and submissions of those FTA grants. We have gone down to Washington, D.C., and we have made the higher ups aware that we had applied for this grant and that we are supportive of it. And again, thank you to the delegation and many others for their support throughout this. And again, we'll continue to coordinate with our internal departments as we move from the phased approach and begin design on those stations moving forward to make them accessible. Next slide. Billy, back to you.
Thank you, Angel. So with that, we will start the Q&A. And as a courtesy and for time constraints, we'd like to first open the floor to elected officials who had joined us tonight. And I'll now walk through the instructions for asking questions and making comments. So to make a comment, you must virtually raise your hand. And to do this on the computer, press Alt-Y or click the raise hand button under the participants tab at the bottom center of your screen. On a mobile device, tap the raise hand button in the bottom center of your screen. And on the phone, dial *9. Once you raise your hand, you'll be added to a queue with others who have raised their hands as well. I will call on folks on a first come, first served basis. When it is your turn to speak, I will say your name and let you know that you are being unmuted. If you're on a computer or mobile device, a box will pop up in the center of your screen. You will need to confirm that you'd like to be unmuted before you begin speaking. If you are on the phone, an automated recording will let you know that you are unmuted. You may speak as soon as the recording finishes. Okay, so with that, we will start with the Q&A. So just a moment, I see Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller. So Mayor Fuller, I will ask to unmute.
Hey folks, Billy, Lisa, Angel, Sharon, huge thanks. I had a chance to get a quick preview of this, so I'm mainly here to listen. I do want to emphasize that the commitment to doing all three phases is very important to Newton. I am willing to move forward with phase one. Only if you can reconfirm that phase 2 and 3 will follow. This is a terribly important step forward for us. Newton has always suffered from infrequent and inaccessible service, and we are doing our part here in Newton with passing the MBTA community zoning and building housing, and we really need this service. I do want to say thank you to Representative Kay Kahn, who has been leading this effort for decades. I want to acknowledge that Congressman Auchincloss is hoping to zoom in, but Dana Hansen is here with us. We have a slew of councilors, city councilors. You're about to hear from many of them, but I do want to acknowledge them as well. Councilors Randy Block, Tariq Lucas, the president, Mark Laredo, Rena Getz, Susan Albright, David Mickley, Josh Krinsman, Pam Wright, Andrea Downs, and John Oliver. And we've got a great mix of city staff here as well. From planning, we've got Barney Heath and Jen Martin. From DPW, Jim McGonigal, Shauna Sullivan, Ned Codd, David Kozis, and both Jonathan Yo and Hattie Kerwin-Derrick are with us. we are all in on this, whatever you need from us, Angel, to move this forward. We are here to support this. We want it designed, constructed, and opened next year, preferably. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to reemphasize, as I mentioned earlier, this is a new phased approach. So just so we're clear, Mayor.
Right.
And thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, Mayor Fuller. Thank you, Angel. And next, I will go to Representative Kay Khan. And I'll ask you to unmute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Representative.
Hi, thank you very much. I also really am here to listen as well, but I really do want to thank you, Angel, and the others for putting this together for this evening. And I'm just thrilled with the turnout. It's wonderful to see all the city councilors and the mayor, and that Dana Hanson is here with for Jake Auchincloss. And I just want to reiterate what Mayor Fuller said, and that is that just to consider that we are a partnership. It's been a long time. I've been at this for probably close to 30 years trying to get this done. And so I was hoping to be able to cut some sort of ribbon before I depart from the legislature on December 31st. So it's just been a long time coming, so I'm happy that we're at this point now. I did have a question when I was looking at the slides. So first of all, I would love it if we could possibly get a copy of the slides.
Yep.
That would be great. And also, so my question is, I noticed that you're starting with the Newtonville station, and I would also reiterate what Mayor Fuller said, and that is that we need to really do all three stations. And so I hope this is the beginning of what will come about. And I think the ridership really has been as difficult because of the fact that these stations are very, very difficult to get down to. And I'm sure that I hope you've all come out to see it. If not, we'd love to give you a tour. But I guess one of the questions that comes up for me is just wondering why you are sort of moving in the Newtonville station sort of the middle of the block. And I just wonder about that. I'd love to know more, because the one thing that's really nice about having it on Walnut Street is there are lots of businesses there where you can get coffee before you get on the T or the commuter rail. And I just think that having it in the middle of the block, I just wonder what the reasoning is. And if you could maybe walk us through that.
I don't know, Sharon, do you want to take a stab at that, or do you want me to?
Absolutely. So that's just a concept, though no engineering has been done. But in general, in order to have a center island platform, we have to spread the tracks apart to make space for 22 feet of platform. And you need to extend that spreading far enough out so that the curve of the track is safe for the commuter rail, ideally to running at full speed for the Amtrak trains that won't be stopping at Newtonville. So in order to do that and not have to move that Walnut Street bridge abutment, we would have to shift the platform. We did a very little preliminary bit of calculations to estimate where it would be, but we haven't done detailed design calculations. We haven't modeled it yet because we're just at a conceptual level right now.
Okay. And that would be, the elevators would be on both sides, I guess is what you're saying.
If we did 2 side platforms, we would have elevators to each platform. That's correct.
Okay. And then just one other question that I can think of at the moment. And so one of the things that that I and also Senator Cream were able to do was to get 85 million into a bond bill, a transportation bond bill that was signed by the governor a couple of years ago now. And I just wondered, is there any opportunity to sort of look at that funding as some some kind of an addition to what we're sort of looking for, because it's, it's very hard to find the funds. Obviously, you're really trying through the federal government and through the grant possibilities. But that's, it's really, because it was about 180 million, I think was the estimate a few years ago. And now it's obviously gone up to 250 to do the whole project. So I was just wondering about that funding we were able to get in a transportation bond bill, and if that's ever something that could be considered to be helpful.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question, Rep. What I would say right now is our focus is on moving with the conceptual designs and awaiting to hear from the federal government on the FTA ASAP grant. That is the current funding strategy, and I would say right now we would have to. We're just waiting on that before we proceed on looking at other options.
Okay,
But that is a great question.
thank you. That's all I have for now, for this moment, but thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative and Angel and Sharon. And next, I see Counselor Susan Albright's hand is up, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you very
Counselor.
much. Thank you very much. I'm excited to have the beginning of this happen tonight. A question I have, first of all, has to do with the mid-block. Our station now has access through both Walnut Street and Harvard Street. So I'm wondering if you're considering still to keep the access through both of those entry points. Do you know the answer to that yet?
So once again, these are conceptual, but if we were to do a 400-foot long platform, we would not be doing the dual access. We'd be doing a single point of access, and ideally not from a bridge at all. Ideally, we would like to connect to the sidewalk along Washington Street. This is an accessibility project, and the sidewalks along bridges are, though ADA compliant because they match the grade of the bridge, it's deeper than you would allow a walkway to be if it was just a walkway. So for accessibility reasons, if possible, we would prefer to connect to the sidewalk.
Okay, that's really interesting. That would change the access totally. And I'm not against that. I think that actually sounds very interesting. Do you know when you'll hear about the grant so that you'll know if you have that federal money?
I expect we'll hear at some point over the next several months, but I do not have a confirmed date on when we'll hear back.
Okay. And of course, we're going to be very interested in the design of whatever the station is that you're going to be designing. Do you have any sense for when that might happen?
At this point, we do not.
Okay. And this is a related but unrelated question in a way. A lot of housing has been created in Newtonville, so I'm glad that you chose Newtonville as a starting point. Housing is going to be created in West Newton, so that's, I hope, coming up soon afterwards. But there was mitigation money attached to the TRIO project, which is right on Washington Street. And that mitigation money was to be used to build a visual fence, so to speak, between the Turnpike and the Washington Street, and then to do an art project on there. And we've been advised that you don't want us to do that project right now. And I don't know exactly why. That mitigation money of several $100,000 is available to us. It would make a big difference on Washington Street. And you probably don't have the answer to this tonight, but I would love to have an answer to this as to can we move ahead with that mitigation project that would build a fence and they would have an art project, which would benefit the community.
Yeah, we'll follow up with you on that one, Counselor. Admittedly, I'm not aware of the mitigation funds, and I'll connect with our transit-oriented development department on that, and we'll get back to you.
That would be great, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. And next I see Counselor Tarek Lucas. So I will ask you to unmute.
Hi, Counselor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, good. Right. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a couple of questions and comments. The first thing is, and I'm not sure if I heard it earlier, will the slide deck be made available on
It
the
will be.
webpage?
It will be. Yep.
Will be, good. Thank you. And the Zoom recording as well?
Yes.
Okay, do you know when you're gonna have that up?
Usually within 24 to 48 hours. They're
Got it.
usually up.
Thank you. I want to piggyback on what Counselor Albright said regarding the potential walls and fences along Washington Street. Pretty much all of Washington Street in this part of Newtonville abuts the Mass Pike.
Mhm.
And as someone who lives near Washington Street, it is loud. It is loud. It's noise from the pike, noise from the trains. And we're going to see more trains go through, assuming once this project is completed.
Mhm.
So when you're redesigning the train station, you're going to be doing a lot of work on Washington Street. One thing that I would like to see the MBTA install is a sound wall on this side of the pike. On the other side of the pike, there are ample sound barriers and sound walls. On this side of the pike and the train tracks, there's nothing. There's not even trees or very little trees. So once this is all finished, and I would like to see a sound wall, sound barriers, and trees along the state portion of the Mass Pike and the train tracks. That would be a major improvement for the people who live on and near Washington Street. So I hope you will seriously look into that.
Thank you for that feedback, Counselor.
And that is all that I have. I look forward to hearing other comments and questions.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thanks very much. And next I see Counselor Pam Wright. So I'll ask you to unmute.
I'm very excited about this. How long is it going to take to complete once you have the money from design to finished station?
I wouldn't speculate on each station is a bit unique. I would defer to the project team and the capital engineering folks on what on average it takes to from design to finish after you get the construction funding on what a project typically costs. I wouldn't want to speculate on that. But Sharon, I don't know, do you?
I can give a little bit of vague information.
That's
Yeah.
It depends on whether we go with the two-side platform design or the center island. Since we had a two-side 800-foot platform design to 75%, we can recycle a lot of that work if we were to shorten it down to a 400-foot platform. If we were to go to a center island platform, there's a lot more design work. So the concept selected would significantly impact the length of design. And then for the length of construction, that would depend on whether or not we want to keep the station open during construction. If you want to keep the station open during construction, then we have to work around maintaining that service, and it lengthens our construction time. I would give a vague estimate based on not having a design in hand of saying at least 3 years if the station is closed, probably 4 or 5 if it's open.
And again, this is very preliminary because we have not made a decision yet on the type of concept that we are going to be moving forward with. So these are very, very, very preliminary.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. So the next thing is, we were told the reason Newtonville was chosen is that the center platform, which is less expensive,
Mhm.
that was the reason why I was doing it. But yet you're looking at dual platforms. And I would think a center platform in general, you need half the elevators and things like that would be less expensive. So are you still open up to either one, or are you going to narrow in
I would
on-
say we're open to either of those designs, keeping accessibility at the forefront of any decision that we end up making. Previously, we had explored, as I understand it, the ability to be able to have a center running platform. But now that we're still open to those discussions internally.
Okay, and why are you choosing west of Walnut Street instead of east of Walnut Street for the station?
Sharon, do you want to take that?
The station is proposed to be in the same location as the existing station.
Okay, so then your drawings are wrong.
They may be, north orientation may not be what you're expecting. It's got Washington Street at the top of the drawing and the Pike at the bottom.
Okay. Okay. That's not what I seem to see. Okay, and the last one is, if we do get this money from the federal government, how much is Newton gonna need to put in?
As I understand it right now, that's not something we are contemplating. The T has matched, has put a $10 million match in order to be able to get the federal grant, in addition to the $7 million that Congressman Auchincloss has secured through federal earmarks. That is not something that we discussed based on the new concepts that we are exploring.
Okay, so we could just, it would be able to do a station with the money that, if we do get the grant.
Right now, that is the intent. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Okay, thanks very much. And next I see Counselor Josh Krinsman, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you very much. Like as others have said, I very much appreciate this meeting tonight and the information, especially as you're going through the process to make some of these decisions. It's helpful to hear what decisions are being made and when. In particular, I want to say thank you to Representative Khan, who I know has been working on this for 30 years. She and I live in the same neighborhood near the Auburndale station, so I've been following this closely. I know Senator Cream and Congressman Auchincloss and Mayor Fuller have also been working on this, so thank you to everyone. Many of my questions were asked, so I'll skip over those, but I wanted to ask about, well, first I wanted to reiterate the importance of getting all three of these stations done for the overall city. I think folks understand that, but it's worth reiterating. In terms of the shift from the 800-foot platform to the 400-foot platform, would that have an impact on the overall timeline of getting all three stations done, or is the exclusive factor in terms of all three funding in the various sources?
Angel, did you want to take that one,
Yeah.
or do you want me to?
Yeah, I could take the first half and you get to some of the technical stuff, but I would say right now, funding is a really critical piece. I think it's pretty well documented that, we are there's a lot of financial pressures that the MBTA and other transit agencies around the country are facing, both from an operating and from a capital perspective. And so figuring out a way to be creative and be innovative to allow folks to be able to see better service, bi-directional service here, and accessible service is at the forefront. So I would say that is a top consideration amongst others as well.
In
So-
terms of whether it will impact how fast we can build the stations, the speed of building the stations is going to be really controlled by safety of our workers. These sites are extremely constrained with the highway on the one side and embankment on the other. And we will have live trains running through much of the time when we're going through construction, similar to how we are doing in Natick Center right now. So we need to be very careful in sequencing our construction work to make sure that we are protecting the safety of all our construction workers and all of our T employees and Keolis employees. So it may surprise you to hear that you actually don't have that much time savings by doing a shorter station, simply because safety is really what's governing that timeline.
No, that makes sense. And I wouldn't have expected it to have a significant impact on the duration of the project. So that's helpful to hear. I didn't see an estimate on what the cost savings would be by modifying the design or going with the shorter platform. Do you have a sense of what that is, or an estimate? Ballpark, understanding, of course, that design hasn't been done and it's all preliminary.
Oh, that's a great question. I would say ballpark. I wouldn't to speculate, but it is a substantial cost. I think we're still figuring out just how much lower the price we can get down. So I don't want to commit to a particular number at the moment, just because there's we have not made a decision on the concept that we're going to go with. But it is certainly a smaller amount that we had before, but I can't commit to a particular number because we have not made a decision.
Okay, thanks. Final question is, do you know which station will be second or how that will be determined?
No,
Of the three.
not at the moment, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Much. And next I see Counselor David Mickley. And I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. I'll ask you to unmute.
You got it, Billy. Thank you very much. And thank you, Angel, for the presentation. It was really helpful and informative. And thank you, everyone, for getting to this stage. We're really excited. I'm the ward counselor in Ward 2. This is in the heart of Ward 2. And I think the biggest issue residents talk about beyond potholes is addressing this commuter rail station. So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm about making these upgrades. So thank you for all your work in pushing this forward. I have an ask for help and an offer for help. So the ask, the request, is from a resident. I know that there's going to be great upgrades to this project when it's complete, but in its current state, the stairs that come down from Walnut Street and come down from Harvard Street don't have a chain link fence that go up beyond the handrails. The former stairs did, the current stairs don't, and the current stairs are definitely better than the old wooden stairs, but there's concerns about safety not having those extended chain link fences along the stairs. So I wanted to see if, I know completion of this project is still a good 5 years away, best case scenario. So if there's anything we could do to put up a chain link fence on both stairs for safety reasons in the interim immediately. So that's the ask. And the offer is, we have about 100 people here, counselors with newsletters, many people with networks. What can we do to advocate to the federal government to get that ASAP grant secured? Is there any grassroots efforts that we could be helpful with, writing letters, making calls? Give us any direction, and we'd be glad to take orders on that, because I think this is one issue that there's clear consensus around that all of Newton wants to get done. So let us know how we can be helpful.
We appreciate both. To your first question, Counselor, I will take that back to the operations team and see if that's something that's feasible. I can't necessarily commit to that, but certainly we could explore it. And then again, thank you for your continued support, and I'm happy to connect offline with you on that other piece.
Thank you very much. And next I see Counselor Julia Malaki. And again, apologize if I mispronounced, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you. It's Malaki, but
Malaki,
you're close.
Thank you so much.
Every teacher had a problem in grade school. My question has to do with the frequency of service and bi-directional service in, what has been rush hours where you can't go the wrong direction from everybody else. Is that going to improve with the improvements at the Newtonville station? And will it just improve for the Newtonville station until the rest of the stations are done? Or does it take all three stations to be improved in order to increase the frequency in both directions?
That is a great question. I think I'll take a quick stab at this, and I would welcome my colleague Alistair Sewers, who I believe is on the call, to get into some other details. The simplest way I could describe it, having a bi-directional platform does improve having more trains that run through the path over Newton, which currently, unfortunately, does not happen because all the stations are on one side. As far as frequency, there's a couple of things to consider. One is signals, amongst many others. But I would let Alistair, because there is a play here and a consideration as it relates to rail electrification and modernization that we are currently in the process of. So Alistair, I would look to you to get into a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, thanks, Angel. So just to clarify, electrification, separate to electrification, there is the opportunity to increase the calls in Newtonville because, as you may have observed, the need to move across onto a single track blocks the whole section. When you're the current express trains bypassing all the Newton stations do not stop, and they use the existing bidirectional track. And once you reopen the twin platform or the track platform that has access to both tracks, you can serve that station on either side. There still are a few more constraints, but basically the answer is we can add more frequencies in Newtonville and Newtonville peak service.
Okay, thank you. And if I could ask one more thing, if it's going to be a number of years, even beyond Newtonville, before you get to the other stations, will anything be done to them to just to sort of spiff them up and make them look not so desolate and unwelcoming?
I would.
I can hand that over to Sharon, but I mean, from an operational perspective, yeah, all stations get maintained, and part of the station maintenance is brightening and a number of modifications. But there's a limit to what we can do without the full rebuild that you've seen in some of these designs.
Okay, thank you.
And it is my understanding that Congressman Auchincloss is on at the moment. I don't know, Congressman, if you had a few things that you wanted to communicate to folks. Please, could we try?
Hi, everybody. Am I coming through?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hey, I appreciate you giving me the floor, Angel, and it's nice to be with everybody. I spoke with Secretary Buttigieg today to convey how strong is the local and federal alignment on the utility and the urgency of this project. This is a project that has been a priority for me, but more importantly for the city of Newton for years now. And Kay Khan really can speak to that, and her career demonstrates that better than anybody. And I emphasize to Secretary Buttigieg that this project not only makes the ADA compliance for the station, it also supports transit-oriented housing, and it is an unlock for East-West Rail for the entirety of Massachusetts. And our application for funding here is complementary to the $7 million I was able to secure through an earmark to move the ball down the field. So we are fighting as hard as possible here in Washington, and along with our two senators who supported this application as well, to make sure that the All Stations Accessibility Program gives this project every consideration. Because I think this is our second to last year that we have. I think there's maybe one more year left for the ASAP grant after this. It is equally, and I say federal and local alignment because in my view, to date, the city of Newton is doing everything necessary to make this as competitive as possible. I think the rezoning that was done, I think the Washington Street revisioning that the city council and the mayor have put forward, all of that really emphasizes the need for better transit to support the development that is being conceived of around Washington Street. It's going to be equally critical that the MBTA be as aligned as the Fed and local level are in prioritizing the station through the capital improvement plan. And I just want to emphasize that I think having the Newtonville commuter rail station and ultimately all three commuter rail stations in the MBTA 5-year CIP this spring is a really important demonstration of that alignment and makes it more likely that this project gets done.
Thank you, Congressman, and we appreciate your help.
Thank you so much. And I see that Councilor Randy Block, I will ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thanks very much for the presentation. It's very helpful. I represent the part of Newton that includes Auburndale, So my questions are oriented in that direction, and I guess that's future oriented. One thing I'm curious about, what work you've done on how to do this project in the shortest amount of time altogether, understanding that the funding remains to be identified. I would think that trying to do as much work simultaneously, especially given all the safety issues that have already been alluded to, I would think that would be a major factor in trying to get this project completed in the shortest amount of time. What can you tell us about that sort of project management approach? And you have any thoughts on how to get as much of this going simultaneously as possible?
Counselor, just so I understand your question, is it essentially, why can't we continue designing the other stations and then maybe start work? Essentially, why can't we do work simultaneously on all three?
Well, as the issues about safety, I would think would be most easily managed all at once, rather than doing safety protections for one station and then ending them and then starting them all over again. So it isn't just a design issue. I guess it's a project management issue. So I'm just wondering if you've thought about that, or if we're just sort of hamstrung and we've got to do one station now and then pause, who knows how long, to get to the rest.
Yeah, that's a great point, I would say, Counselor. The way that I would phrase it is, we are in many respects hamstrung. There are impacts of service to service that I think Sharon had alluded to, that we need to take into consideration, because it is such a busy area of trains that run through it. And I would also reiterate that we did attempt to secure funding for all three through the federal ASAP grant a few years ago, and the feedback that we received from the FTA, how to make it more competitive, is to go and look at a different approach. And so we really did keep that in mind. And so unfortunately, I would say our hands are hamstrung with respect to that, but that is a point well taken.
Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Counselor. Billy, do we want to take a few questions from the chat, or what do we have?
Sure. So I do see that Representative Khan's hand is up. Maybe a final comment from Rep Khan.
Okay.
Then I can move to the chat. I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, Rep.
Hi. Oh, thank you again for allowing me to ask a couple of more questions. I was just wondering about the ADA and the FTA. How will you be working with them on this? Because I'm just wondering how that will fit with a 400 foot length platform when you have trains coming in that are, from on the Worcester line, that are long,
Yep.
Many cars, and then sometimes they're shorter. So I just wondered how you are going to be working with the FTA and the FDA on those issues.
We've had preliminary conversations with the FTA about the concepts that we're currently exploring, and I certainly wouldn't want to get ahead of that, but I would just reemphasize that the point here is to, aside from improving service bidirectionally to the city of Newton, the other thing that's critically important is the safety and the accessibility of that station. So we will be working extremely close with them, and they are aware of the concepts that we're currently exploring. And we obviously will work internally with our operations folks to take that into account. It'll be quite a few folks, and it won't be a decision that I would say would be made in a vacuum. But that's a good question.
Okay, and then along those lines, again, looking at mid-block, the parking, I guess I was thinking about, because the parking currently, the most parking that would maybe be used by folks taking the commuter rail is closer to the bridge. So I just wondered about that, because then obviously the parking is gonna be something to consider or think about. So I'm just wondering if that you might want to take that into some consideration in terms of mid-block versus more closer to Walnut Street. And then just, those are two things to think about. And I'd like to, know more about your thinking along those lines. So thank you.
When we have an update on those considerations, we'll certainly be keeping the delegation abreast of any major decisions we make with respect to the concept. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Angel, can I quickly step in a second there? So on the question of shorter platforms, I think some of you have heard about the issues around or our plans around electrification, running higher frequency service. The service design is to run high frequency small train sets. So move the same amount of people by running more frequency. So the 800-foot trains will not be stopping at this station. This will be the high frequency service, the more urban pattern. This was all outlined in Rail Vision, which was done before COVID. So this is a high frequency station, so we will not need such long platforms. So there will, just to be very, very clear, the intent is not to have a train longer than the platform length stopping at the station. That is not the design, not the service aspect, whether that's diesel or electric. So that is clear. That would be an accessibility issue, and we understand that.
Thank you, Alistair. Okay. The next hand raised question, Billy.
Yes, so next we have Laura DeVue, and I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Laura DeVoe, and I'm the Vice President of the Newtonville Area Council. We're a small group of folks who work as a conduit between residents and our city councilors. And so thank you for having this meeting. I'm also a multimodal transit enthusiast, so this is very exciting to me. So just for clarification, because I've heard a few different things and also Zoom cuts in and out, I want to make sure I understand that the center island platform design, would that be the preferred design if we want to have more runs in a day? Or do we want the two platforms? That's my first question. I have a second question and a quick third one, but I'm going to keep it quick.
I can answer that one, Angel. The two-side platform and center island platform concepts both would service both tracks and both would support bi-directional service. So in terms of the ability to run more trains, the frequency or the directions, that does not impact center island versus two-side platform.
Okay, great. My second question is regarding landscaping and beautification. I know that Alistair brought up that there is ongoing maintenance. Anyone who walks over to the Newtonville stop right now, it's not pretty. I have a teenager, her room's cleaner than the side of the highway right now. So I think it's important for us to understand is that it's really not attractive. And I know during the construction phase, it will continue to be unattractive, which I'm willing to deal with. But down the road, is there a consideration on how to make it more attractive? And as a follow-up to that, in this, is there going to be any consideration of putting in bike racks as part of the re-engineering of the space in order to encourage multimodal access to the station? And increase the number of people actually using bikes and scooters to get to the train.
Since we've only taken this one to concept, we haven't done a lot of those details, but I can, based on what we did for the previous design that we brought to 75%, we included visual screens so that way our passengers wouldn't be uncomfortable looking right at a highway as they went down a set of stairs. So we did include some visual screens on the backside of the platform. If we were doing a center island concept, I'm not sure how we would manage that because we haven't designed it yet. We did include bike racks for multimodal and other micromobility options to come for the station. That would have to be designed based on the amount of space we have available at our transition platform or our transition plaza. at the station entrance.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, you had a third item there?
No, that was my third
Oh,
item was really about the bikes and the landscaping together,
Yep.
so.
Doctor, the other thing.
Typically,
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, typically our landscaping, we design to be as low maintenance as possible.
Right.
We don't want to put in a plant that we need to go and maintain and then fail to maintain. So we have design guidelines for plant choice that the MBTA will install. And beyond the station limits is the city of Newton property.
Fantastic, thank you.
Doctor, I would just real quickly, just as a new approach that we're taking as an organization. So the general manager has brought in a chief of stations. The general manager believes that it's really important that our stations, they are kind of the gateways into the system. So having someone that's dedicated to be able to maintain those stations is something that's really important to us.
Mhm.
And what I would add is that our designs are the things that we keep in mind is how we can maintain those stations going forward. So we're not going into a situation where we're not able to maintain them like we did in the past. It's a new way of how we're doing business. And I would just want to reiterate that.
And your comments are noted on the issues with debris and litter. It is always difficult being next to the pike, and the center element design does mitigate that.
Thank you all. And next, I will go to John, asked to unmute.
Good evening. John Pelletier, 103 Madison Ave, Newtonville. I can actually see the station from my back porch. I'm also a member of the Council on Aging for the city. Couple quick notes. Center platform, if it is such, are you looking, obviously there'd be a single elevator to get to that platform. Are you looking at having kind of a ramp up from the Washington Street curb? Are you looking to would you need an elevator there as well because of the grade change needed to get to that center platform? And then the final was just more of a comment, looking at it and based on where the current station is, it's kind of counterintuitive. It seems like you're going to be walking longer. Somebody does go to the train, but it doesn't look like you actually would be walking longer. Because this is the nature of where the actual station is and where the trains pick you up, which is basically at the covered platform right now. If you're coming from the Walnut side, I would think the Harvard Street side people might have a little bit of a longer walk, just because they may get on at the front part of the train going inbound. But yeah, my main was how is that access for the single center platform from Washington Street kind of into that middle area? What is that looking like?
Next slide, please. You're showing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that one.
So we are conceptually proposing two elevators onto the platform, and that is so that we have redundancy in case one elevator breaks. The reason why we're proposing elevators and not ramps is because of the length of the ramps. Ramps will be 300 feet long. So trying to get that in and have it raise up high enough to be clear of the train's, we call it the dynamic envelope, so any space that the train could occupy and therefore could hit. It's very constrained. So we're proposing two elevators, but then a ramp at the sidewalk.
Okay, yeah, it was a ramp because the height isn't quite enough.
Right. When we were doing the previous round of design, all the heights of those up and over bridge pedestrian bridge structures were set with the idea of leaving space for catenary wires in the future.
Excellent.
So it's actually up a little higher than strictly necessary. So that way, in about 10 years, people don't come along and ask me why I didn't consider electrification.
Yeah, I think it's similar to where the Worcester stations rebuild. Those overhead look a little bit higher than they would be normally, and I suspect that's a similar situation. So very good, very excited for this project. I mean, my wife and I have lived in Newtonville for 10 plus years. We bought our condo here because of the transportation options. So this is really exciting to keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next, Meg Ward, I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Meg Ward. I live Washington Street. I've been living in Newtonville and taking the commuter rail for, nearly 30 years. I'm not going to speak on the continuing decline of service right now on that. I want to speak on the environment around the Newtonville station and mostly along the Mass Pike as well. And I want to piggyback off of what Councilor Albright and Councilor Lucas were talking about in terms of a wall. I was not aware that we had a mitigation fund with the trail project, but to me that makes sense. Because the north side of the Mass Pike corridor, which is along the railroad tracks as well, we have no sound barriers at all whatsoever. We have barely any trees. MassDOT had clear cut a whole bunch of trees in 2018. What little buffer we had from noise and pollution was absolutely decimated. And it's just a absolute clear view of the highway, the train, and everything. And I'm going to ask everyone, particularly local representatives and delegation, stand right across the corridor at Harvard Ave, both east and west of the Harvard Ave Bridge. There are sound barriers. And I ask, in fact, I implore all of our local representatives to take a moment, stand on Bauer Street next to the sound barrier, and then go across on the north side and stand anywhere and try to have a conversation. It is absolutely striking the difference. The noise is so buffered with these sound barriers, and the people on the north side of on the Mass Pike corridor have had nothing. We have had no sound barriers, no trees. And I'm asking, and I'm asking, and I'm imploring that whatever the reason is for the wall that Councilor Albright was mentioning that could not be built, I encourage that. I don't know what the reason is, but we in the north side really have a crappy environment, and we deserve better. And I don't know why the south side of the corridor gets all the sound barriers and the trees, but we in the north side deserve as well. And I would like to see this considered into the track improvements and all the construction going on, that mitigating factors like sound barriers are put on the north side to make it more palatable and pleasant to be on the north side of the Mass Pike. That's it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move to the questions received in the chat. So first, from Terry Alter, what are the current lengths of all of the Newton commuter rail stations?
Our standard commuter rail stations are 800 feet long. I believe the West Newton one is slightly shorter because of the spacing of the bridges, but they're all in approximately that ballpark of about 800 feet.
Great, thanks very much. And next from Scott Oran, two-part question. First, who developed the cost estimates, and are they available for public review? And second, please explain the difference between the two concepts. And a comment, please post drawings for public review.
The cost estimates were developed by our consultants, our design consultants. We haven't published any design documents for public review at this time. And we also don't have drawings. We just have these sketches that we have in this presentation, which Angel's already said will be made public. And sorry, the other part was, what are the differences?
Yes. What are the differences between the two concepts?
The primary difference between the two concepts is whether we have a single center island platform or two side platforms. By having two side platforms, the track would remain substantially in the same location with small shifts. This would help us keep the or maintain and adjust to allow for maximum speed along the tracks for our other users of our trains and for our express service, which, as Alistair was explaining, that there will be various types of service. With the Center Island platform, we need to spread those tracks apart in order to make space for that 22-foot wide platform in the middle. At 22 feet wide is our minimum width. That's why I happen to know that number. So when you spread those tracks, there's significant impacts in order to maintain the curvature for the safe train speed. And also we have to make sure that the tracks are sufficiently level when the train is stopped in the station. So that way the walkway through the train is at an ADA compliance cross slope. That really governs everything else. In terms of service, both concepts give us both service to both tracks and therefore bidirectional. With a Center Island platform, you only need to have one set of elevators instead of two sets. The reduced cost in that less access infrastructure is offset by the increased cost of the track work. We haven't developed detailed cost estimates, so I really couldn't tell you in detail the cost difference. I could say that they would be in the same ballpark. But in terms of amenities, in terms of user experience, the only difference that you would experience as a rider is with a Center Island platform, you're always going to be on the right platform. If it's two side platforms, you have to check to make sure you know what platform you're going to.
Thanks so much, Sharon. The next question is from Chris Markowicz, and it's with respect to the selection of Newtonville. Were elected officials in Newton municipal government included in the evaluation and selection of the station?
I would say those decisions, we briefed members of folks regarding Newtonville Station, but those considerations were made based on some of the reasoning that we had in the earlier slide, ridership, how we can deliver the project sooner in order to be able to provide accessible bidirectional service as quickly as possible to the city of Newton, which currently does not have that. They were brief.
Great, thank you, Angel. The next question is from Drew Ardini. Question and comment. He says, it seems like a missed opportunity to not build a full-length platform. Can you comment further on the cost savings versus a full-length platform for faster loading and unloading? And can the city of Newton contribute cash for the longer platform and better station?
I would defer to the city on that particular piece. That's outside of my purview. Thank you for those comments. But there's a lot of things that we take into consideration, accessibility being first and foremost. Alistair?
Yeah, I also want to add, there is a misperception. We're not missing an opportunity. So the platform will meet the service level that is calling at the station. There is no, there's no reason for an express train to stop here, so there's two patterns currently on the line. There is the zonal express, as we call it, which is fast from Framingham in, and then there's the local, which starts at Framingham and calls at all stations. Both of those were aiming at increasing frequency, and the intent, on the higher frequency version on the local train is to have a shorter train set that calls more frequently. So you do not need that 800-foot long train. None of the long trains will be calling at the station. So that's just a clarification. So nobody's missing anything. You're getting a high quality service, higher frequency, accessible, affordable, hopefully. So all the above.
Great. Thank you both. And now I see a hand from Terry Alter, who had asked a question earlier. So Terry, I'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I do appreciate also for your comments earlier to make in guaranteeing that the platform lengths were appropriate for train length. I've been on some of these trains, and frankly, I'm amazed that the conductors are able to maintain order on the train, and making sure everybody's able to get on and off. Obviously, our trains are different from, say, the Metro North, which use different kinds of trains. My only comment I would make is I think, and I'm a layperson and I do not have degrees in engineering or that field. I would say it would be really nice to have some future proofing at some of these stations, just so in case the trains become longer, or in case our trains look more similar to like the Metro North, like M5, M7, M8 cars, it'll be easier to extend the platforms. I will say I live in West Newton. I live at 32 Auburn Street, but I do occasionally go to Newtonville, and the Harvard entrance, for instance, that is very useful. Say if I want to have lunch at Cabot's or go to the Village Cafe. And although it's a little bit of a walk, it's also very close to Congressman Auchincloss's Newton office, which is located on Craft Street. So I'm not saying, like we should just, save the Harvard entrance for the sake of saving the Harvard entrance. But I would like to see, like with these designs, like as long as we can future proof it. So say we need to extend the platform in like the future, like even if it's like the 2060s or 2070s, I think that'd be very beneficial. So that way we can get as many trains in as well. And I will say, if the 400 foot design is going to be, this 400 foot platforms, that's going to be the if that's going to be the standard for all of the other Newton stations, I think it's also important to preserve entrance access on both sides. Where I live in West Newton, I used the side, the entrance near the exit ramps of I-90 at that exit. I think it's now number 125. It used to be 16. And that's very beneficial. And the other side is extremely beneficial for people who want to go into West Newton Square to enjoy all the businesses and amenities there. So those are my comments. Obviously, West Newton and Auburndale, there's still ways to go, but I really do like the fact that we're actually starting to see some more visuals. And I think this is a big improvement from the original designs from 2019.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next, a question from the chat. This is from Alan Mountjoy. And the question is, what is the proposed use or reuse of the diagonal parking on Washington Street? Can that be used for bus intermodal connections and more transit rider amenities?
I would say.
So I have detailed
Sure, go
answers for
ahead.
this one. At this station, the city of Newton owns all the parking. We have, through our previous designs, we have come up with some concepts that included some pickup drop-off and dedicated accessible parking spaces that we have suggested to the city, but we can't make those decisions on our own. We have to work with the city to come to an agreement on what that would look like.
And the other thing that I would just add is we're at a preliminary stage where we have not really gotten into that level, into too much detail about that, but something that we will certainly keep in the back of our mind.
Great. Thank you both. Next, we have a question from Jason Bardwaj. And the question is there an option to add a simple temporary non-ADA compliant opposing platform to West Newton and Auburndale as a stopgap solution to allow more trains to service those stations?
No. In the nicest possible way, we can't build something that's not accessible. That would be against ADA. That would be against our policies as the MBTA. And simple is really simple when you're trying to make sure that it is safe and ADA compliant.
Thank you. And next in the chat, we have a question from Jennifer Sula. And the question is, if the Newtonville station is going to be closed during construction, is the MBTA thinking of reinstituting the buses that previously went down Washington Street? So the 553, 554, 556, and 558? That could mitigate closing the station.
Right now, it's too early to have those conversations, and I would reference folks to the bus network redesign implementation that we had gone through pretty extensive feedback. But right now, it's, I would say, too early to talk mitigations at this point.
Excellent. And then the last question that I see in the chat is from Sarah L. And the question is, will the new platforms provide level boarding or allow for level boarding for new future train sets? And
Yes.
right.
Yes.
So when we say that they are fully ADA compliant, what we mean is that it would be high level boarding, and that it would have an accessible path of egress. So in this case, we're proposing elevators and ramps up to from the sidewalk for the Center Island concept. But yes, when we say fully ADA compliant, that is part of that general definition.
Perfect. Then we did have a couple of things added in the chat. So one is a comment from Councillor Andrea Downs, and that's that the city of Newton will also add bike racks near the stations and has some there now. I wanted to note that comment. And then a question from Amy Sangiolo. Will there be coordination with the I-90 Alston project so that folks can still get in and out of Boston?
I would say that we are always coordinating with our local agency, partner agencies, federal, state, and local stakeholders. So that yes, we would be coordinating with many folks. We don't do this in a vacuum. We see the transportation system as all interconnected in one way, shape, or form, and so we would obviously be coordinating with folks.
Great. Thank you so much. And with that is all of the questions at the moment that appear in the chat. And I see that no hands are raised. So we'll give it a few more moments if there are additional questions. Oh, and I see a hand is raised here, Terry. I'll ask you to unmute.
Just briefly, I think I put it in the meeting chat, but personally, if any of the Newton stations are closed, I do strongly support delaying the overhaul for the BPP and have all the buses 553, 554, 556, 558 have their express service to Boston reinstated during any of the station closures, and adding 505 express service, adding more service not just on weekdays, but having Saturday and Sunday service during any of the station closures. That's just my quick brief comment.
Thank you so much, and thanks for adding that to the chat. And then a question from Anthony Tucker just came in, and that is, was a passing track / express track ever considered at Auburndale? Passing track at Auburndale would be useful when considering the planned third track project on the Worcester line between Framingham and Weston.
So I happen to be the project manager for the third track project. And I happen to know, unfortunately, that the bridges under the highway are the choke point, and we can't fit 3 tracks under there.
I'd also add the only other way is to take a lane off the pike, but there we go.
Okay, thank you so much. And I see that Dennis has a hand raised. So Dennis, I'll ask you to unmute, please.
A very simple question. In the MBTA vision plan, there was an idea to connect Riverside directly to the main line for commuter rail into Boston from the end of the Green Line. is that under consideration?
Simple answer, yes, it is still under consideration. We've done a couple of studies to look at the potential for that. It was originally intended as the turn point for the urban rail service. Unfortunately, as you may well know, there's quite a long gap between the commuter rail line and the Green Line station and the yard at the back of the Green Line. So we're looking at ways of addressing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we'll give it a few more moments. If there are any final questions, we do have our contact information up, and this is the website where you can find more information, including this presentation, in the near future. Okay, and thank you so much for attending tonight. And thanks again. Have a good night.
Good evening, guys.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, all.